When I inherited my grandparents' $900,000 estate, I quietly moved it into a trust, just in case. Last week, my brother showed up with Mom, grinning. We had the house signed into my name. You're out by Friday. I just smiled and said, you really think I'd let that happen? 2 days later, they returned with movers and froze when they saw who was standing on the porch, holding the folder. My name's Jason. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life, my family figured I was the kind of guy who'd just stay quiet when things got messy. You know, the one who kept his head down, agreed with everyone, never made a fuss. And to be honest, maybe that used to be true. But when my grandparents passed and left their entire estate to me, yeah, the house, the savings, and stocks just shy of $900,000, something inside me flipped. Suddenly, I was paying closer attention. I started picking up on the little things I'd always brushed off. More importantly, I started making a plan, because I knew exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. My younger brother, Brandon, he's 3 years behind me, is all flash. Loud, charming, smooth-talking. The sort of guy who can feed you a bold-faced lie with a grin and still walk away with a $5,000 investment for one of his can't-miss ideas. He'd skated by like that for years. Opened credit cards in our mom's name. Took out a car loan he never intended to pay, and then, surprise, the car disappeared. And every time, like clockwork, Mom swooped in and bailed him out. She always said, he's just figuring things out. But me? I was expected to hold it all together. The reliable one. The fallback plan. The safety net. And I'd had enough of that role. When Grandpa died 2 years ago, Grandma had passed a year before. He left everything solely to me. I wasn't shocked. I was the one who had been there for them when no one else picked up the phone, let alone came by. I drove them to doctor appointments, ran errands, handled all the paperwork. Brandon? He'd pop in on Christmas morning, snap a few photos for social media, and vanish till the next holiday. So when the will was finally read and my name was the only one on it, I caught the look Mom shot me. That tight smile, like she was sucking on a lemon. Like I'd stolen something that didn't belong to me. That's when it hit me. The storm was on its way. The house was the crown jewel. A beautiful old Victorian, all red brick and tall windows, with ivy climbing the sides like it was plucked straight from a movie scene. It had been in our family for 3 generations. My grandparents kept it in immaculate shape, even while the whole neighborhood was booming. Houses all around were getting gutted and flipped for crazy prices, but my grandparents never sold. Now, it belonged to me. I didn't move in right away. I stayed at my apartment across town and quietly got to work organizing everything. I had the place appraised, consulted with an estate attorney, and set up a trust. Not just for the house, for every asset. And I didn't breathe a word to anyone. Not Brandon. Not Mom. Nobody. I secured the original deed in a safe place and transferred all of it, the house, the title, savings, shares, into an irrevocable trust with me listed as the trustee. I even changed the utilities over to a business name linked to the trust. Cost me a little more, sure, but I didn't care. I knew my family too well. I knew they'd pull something. And for a little while, it was oddly quiet. Too quiet. Brandon sent a few texts asking if he could use the pool. The house doesn't even have one. Mom, on the other hand, kept dropping passive-aggressive comments about how unfair it was that everything went to just one person. At one point she even said, well, your brother was always Grandpa's favorite. Like that meant something now. I just smiled and changed the subject. Didn't argue. Didn't explain anything. I let them assume I was clueless. That I hadn't put up any guardrails. But things really kicked off last month. Brandon started posting those cryptic updates on social media. You know the type. Big things ahead. New chapter coming soon. Typical nonsense. Then one Saturday, I was over at the house doing yard work. Nothing major, just trying to stay on top of the landscaping, when I saw Mom's car pull up. Brandon jumped out first, all sunglasses and swagger, acting like he was stepping onto a movie set. Mom followed with a clipboard in hand and a weirdly cheerful look, like she was about to cut a ribbon on some fancy real estate project. Hey man. Brandon slapped my shoulder. We've got some news. I gave him a raised eyebrow. I asked. Mom stepped up with a too-sweet smile. We spoke with a lawyer, she said. Apparently, your grandfather made a mistake not updating the will after your grandmother passed. Technically, the house should have gone to both of you. But don't worry, she added. We've already taken care of it. I stared at her. Taken care of what, exactly? I asked. Brandon pulled a paper out of his pocket like he was holding a winning lottery ticket. We had the house title transferred to my name, he said. It's already finalized. You've got until Friday to move out. But hey, no hard feelings, right? We'll give you time to pack. I didn't say a word for a few seconds. Just looked at the two of them, one after the other, soaking in their smug expressions. The sheer nerve. My pulse didn't spike. I didn't break a sweat. If anything, I almost laughed. They really thought I was that gullible. I gave them a small smile, the kind that makes people uneasy. You really think I'd let that happen? Brandon laughed like I'd just cracked a joke. It already is, dude. You've been living in your own little world too long. Mom tried softening her tone, as if she thought being gentle would help. We're not trying to be mean, Jason, she said. It's just practical. Brandon can handle the property, maybe flip it. You've already got your own place. This way, everyone wins. I didn't push back, just nodded and said, got it. 2 days later, they came back. This time they brought a moving truck and a couple of hired movers. I saw it coming a mile away. They rolled into the driveway like they already owned the place, laughing and shouting. Brandon rode shotgun, sipping his coffee, while Mom barked directions at the movers like she was running the show. But then they looked up at the porch. There I was, standing with my arms crossed next to a tall guy in a navy blue suit. He held a thick folder in one hand and wore a badge clipped to his belt. The cover had the name of the trust printed on it, a name they hadn't heard before. And the badge? It was legit. The man was real. The suit was real. And he worked for the county office of property records. They froze. Brandon stepped out of the truck, looking confused. What's going on here? I didn't say anything. The man in the suit took it from there. His name was Mr. Levin, and he cleared his throat with the kind of calm you only hear from someone who's done this 100 times and doesn't get fazed by drama. He tucked the folder under one arm, glanced at the document in his hand, and spoke in a steady, no-nonsense tone. Are you Brandon Green? He asked. Brandon blinked, clearly caught off guard. Yeah? Who's asking? Mr. Levin stepped forward a little. I'm with the county office of property records. I'm here on behalf of the legal trustee for the East Thornhill estate. That would be this property here, the man said, gesturing over his shoulder toward the house. He held up the folder and continued. I've got paperwork here that confirms the deed's been placed into a trust since last April. The trust is under the sole management of Jason Green. Then he looked directly at Brandon. Any attempts to claim ownership of this home after that date, including a falsified title transfer, aren't just invalid. They're considered criminal offenses. Brandon's face went pale like someone had flipped a switch. Criminal? He muttered, turning to Mom in confusion. What's he even talking about? Mom stepped in, her mouth pulled tight. There's got to be some kind of mix-up, she said. We had a lawyer check the old deed. It still listed Grandpa's name. We just assumed. You assumed wrong, I said, finally breaking my silence. I never held the house in my name directly. I placed it into a trust. That's why you couldn't find anything in the public records. So instead, you went and found some shady operation willing to process a fake title based on outdated documents. Mr. Levin gave a single, slow nod. I've already filed a fraud complaint regarding the attempted title change. Normally, we'd issue a formal warning before taking action. He adjusted the folder under his arm and added, but in this case, bringing movers, attempting to occupy the house, trying to evict the legal trustee, we're moving straight to enforcement. Brandon blinked. Enforcement? I turned a bit toward him and spelled it out. It means if you set foot on this property again without my permission, it's trespassing. And if you mess with the trust or any of its assets, you'll be facing criminal charges. And not just one. There'll be multiple. There was a heavy pause. Nobody said anything. The movers were standing there awkwardly, caught between their truck and the porch, clearly realizing they'd stumbled into something they wanted no part of. One of them coughed, then slowly started inching his way back toward the van. Brandon finally broke the silence. You're really doing this? To your own family? My voice stayed level, almost too calm. Family? You showed up at my doorstep with a forged title and a moving truck. You tried to steal the only thing Grandpa and Grandma ever asked me to protect. Don't throw the word family at me like it still means something. Mom's jaw clenched. They were just confused, Jason, she said carefully, her voice starting to shake. They didn't know what they were doing. No, I said firmly, cutting her off. You didn't know? You thought I'd still be that same doormat I was at 20, the kid you could guilt into covering for Brandon's nonsense, or stick with the fallout every time you needed a favor. Well, I'm not that kid anymore. I got smarter. I paid attention, and I planned for this exact moment. Mr. Levin flipped through his folder again and chimed in. Just so everything's clear, we've already notified the local police precinct. If either of you comes back claiming any ownership over this property, there'll be a civil and criminal file ready to go. Brandon's eyes flashed, but he kept his mouth shut this time. He turned to the movers and barked, We're done. Let's go. He didn't even glance in my direction. Mom stayed frozen for a second longer, her mouth half open like she was about to make one last plea. One final manipulation. But nothing came out. She turned and followed him without a word. The truck backed out of the driveway and disappeared down the hill. I stood there on the porch, watching their taillights fade. And then it got quiet again. That thick kind of silence that settles in after a confrontation that's been simmering for years. Mr. Levin handed me a copy of the filed fraud report and told me to give him a call if they showed up again. I thanked him. After he left, I just stood there a while, right on that same porch where I used to sit with Grandpa. I'd listened to him go on about how important it is to really know people. Not just their words, but the way they move, the choices they make, the patterns they repeat. He always said, don't judge folks by what they say when everyone's watching. Pay attention to what they do when they think you aren't. He wasn't wrong. I'd been watching. And this time, I finally took action. But that wasn't the end of it. 3 days later, a letter showed up. Neatly typed. Formal. Signed by a new lawyer, one my mother had hired. In the letter, she claimed she was suffering emotional distress and argued that, as a direct family member, she deserved a piece of the estate. She said being cut out had caused her severe psychological harm, and attached to that letter was a list of demands she labeled as reasonable reparations. She wanted $150,000 in cash, half ownership of the house, and a monthly allowance until further notice. I sat there staring at the letter, numb at first. Then my hands started to shake, but not from fear. From rage. Pure, burning fury. Because she wasn't done. And now? Neither was I. I must have read that letter 6 different times in total silence before setting it down on my desk. At first, I tried to understand it. Tried to imagine she didn't mean it how it sounded. But by the 6th time through, there was no sugarcoating it anymore. My own mother had signed her name to a legal document demanding I pay her for not letting her and Brandon rob me blind. It wasn't even the money that got to me. It was the nerve, the entitlement, the delusion of it all. To go from, this is just a misunderstanding, to you owe me $150,000 in a matter of days. As if this whole mess were some corporate dispute between strangers. And there was one phrase that kept ringing in my ears louder than anything else in the letter. Familial obligation. Like loyalty was something that only flowed one direction, upward, to them. Like I was born to give, and they were born to take. I didn't write back. Not right away. I knew better than to lash out emotionally. Instead, I called Mr. Levin. He put me in touch with an estate attorney named Sonia Cruz. She was in her early 40s, calm and direct, with this laser focus that let you know she didn't waste time bluffing, because she didn't need to. I gave her everything I had. The trust paperwork, the letter from Mom's attorney, screenshots from Brandon's social media, next chapter, nonsense. By the next day, Sonia had already drafted and filed a formal cease and desist against both of them. The message was crystal clear. The trust was legally sound, fully protected, and neither of them had any legal standing whatsoever. But Sonia didn't stop there. She dug deeper. Turns out, Brandon had forged more than just a signature or two trying to pull off that title stunt. He'd even used a fake notary stamp. Filed the whole thing through some sketchy online service based in another state, hoping it wouldn't be flagged in our county system. Sonia didn't waste time. She looped in a fraud investigator from the county district attorney's office. Turns out, that shady online registry Brandon used? It was already on the radar. Investigators had been digging into it for other cases involving forged documents, and without even realizing it, Brandon had just volunteered himself as the easiest target on their list. I still hadn't told him, or my mom, that I knew all this. I figured, if they wanted to keep pushing, I'd let them. Let him dig that hole deeper. And dig they did. 2 weeks after Sonia sent the cease and desist, another letter showed up. This one wasn't from a lawyer. It came directly from my mother. Less formal, but still typed up. The tone, though, it screamed her. It was dripping with passive-aggressive lines like, "After all I've done for you," and "You were always the quiet one," and the classic, "I raised you to be better than this." She wrapped it up with, "You can stop all this right now by just doing the right thing. Families shouldn't need lawyers when love and understanding can fix everything." I didn't reply, didn't even entertain it. Sonia had already warned me, do not engage. So I scanned the letter, emailed it to Sonia, and she added it to the ever-growing file we were putting together. One we could use later, especially if it came to filing for a restraining order. And then came the kicker. One morning, I went out to get the mail and noticed a piece of paper shoved into the door handle. Not an envelope, no address, just a folded-up flyer wedged in like it was left by some bored teenager playing a prank. But the handwriting? I knew it right away. Brandon. The note said, "Hope you're enjoying playing king of the castle. Just remember who really has your back when the money runs dry." I let out this quiet, tired laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. That kind of laugh you give when you realize someone you used to know really has no idea how far you've moved past them. I scanned that note too, added it to the file. But right then and there, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just sit back and defend myself anymore. I was done playing nice. It was time to fight back. Brandon was already being looked into for attempted real estate fraud. But Sonia explained that if we could show clear intent to harass or cause damage, we could take things even further, legally and personally. See, while criminal court would handle the fraud, there was another way to hit him where it hurt. His reputation, his credit, his record, even his job. Brandon had recently landed a gig at some flashy boutique real estate firm, the kind that cares more about their Instagram image than actual compliance. They marketed themselves on integrity, honesty, ethical property transfers, the whole polished package. So I got curious. Would they still feel proud knowing one of their agents tried to steal a house using forged documents? Still, I didn't rush into anything. I waited. And that's when something unexpected happened. My cousin Megan, who I hadn't talked to in years, suddenly messaged me on Facebook. "Hey, can we talk? Your mom's been saying some stuff to the family. I figured you should know." We met for coffee the next morning. Megan had always been the straight shooter in the family. No games, no drama. That hadn't changed. She came prepared too. Showed me screenshots of texts, voicemails, even a group chat between her and a couple of her other cousins. Turns out, my mother had launched a full-blown smear campaign. She was calling up relatives, telling them I'd manipulated Grandpa during his final years, that I pressured him to change the will when he was mentally declining. She even went so far as to suggest I'd taken advantage of him. Emotionally, legally, maybe even medically. It made me feel sick. That's when I knew. This wasn't about the house anymore. Wasn't about money. Wasn't even about Brandon. This was about control. My mother couldn't handle the fact that I had finally said no, that I had protected something she couldn't touch. And now, she was out to destroy me for it. Megan looked at me across the table and said, I don't believe a word she said. Jamie and Chris don't either. But she's not stopping. She's calling everybody. I nodded, my heart thudding harder than I wanted it to. Thanks for telling me. I didn't sleep much that night. Because that was the moment it hit me. If she was willing to lie to the entire family, twist the truth into something monstrous just to pressure me into giving her what she wanted, then I had to be willing to go the distance. Not just for myself, but to make sure she and Brandon never pulled something like this again, with me or with anyone else. And what I did next, well, let's just say lawyers weren't the only tool I used. I spent the next 2 days holed up in my study, planning. The trust was locked down. Legally, it was airtight. That part was solid. But the damage they were doing to my name? That was already spreading across the extended family like wildfire. Megan's warning came just in time. But the smear had already gained traction. Suddenly, I was getting vague texts from distant relatives, second cousins, great uncles I barely knew. Stuff like, just wanted to check in, or hope everything's okay. Heard a few things. It didn't take a genius to figure out where those things were coming from. My mother wasn't just trying to take the house. She wanted to poison my name, ruin my credibility so completely that no one would ever trust my side of the story. And if I let that happen, I knew exactly what came next. The guilt trips, the sideways comments at family reunions, the whispers behind my back. Eventually, someone would suggest I just be the bigger person and offer them a little something for peace. I saw the trap being laid. I wasn't going to walk into it. So I built my own. With Sonia's help, I put together a legal declaration. Nothing fancy, just a plain statement of facts, supported by every piece of evidence we'd gathered. The forged documents, the fake notary stamp, the fake title transfer, the letters, the texts, the voicemail recordings, the attempted home seizure, and the lies being told to anyone who would listen. We even included screenshots Megan had sent me, voicemails from my mom, calling me a manipulator, and that absurd demand for $150,000 in reparations. But I didn't stop at filing it with the court. I wrote a simple, direct email, attached a clean, easy-to-read version of the declaration. Then I sent it to every single family member my mom had talked to. 27 people. I wrote, Hi, I know there's been some talk going around. Before anyone makes up their mind, I want you to have the facts, not stories. Everything is backed by documents, not rumors. After this, I'm not going to talk about it again. Believe me or don't. That's your call. But at least make it with the full picture in front of you. Then I hit send. The fallout? It came fast. Within a few hours, I had 5 replies from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Most were apologetic. Some folks were absolutely stunned. My Aunt Karen, who used to act like Brandon could walk on water, called me that night in tears. She believed every lie my mom fed her, until she saw the proof with her own eyes. That letter, the folder full of evidence. Her voice cracked as she said, I had no idea. She repeated it again, almost like she was trying to convince herself. I swear I didn't know. Jason, I'm so sorry. But I wasn't looking for apologies. That wasn't the point. I just told her I hoped she finally understood why I had to do what I did. Still, not everyone came around like she did. 3 relatives on my mom's side actually dug in deeper, doubled down, saying I was twisting the story. One even had the nerve to say I faked the documents. At that point, I realized I wouldn't get through to everybody. But for every one of those folks, there were 5 more who reached out just to say, thanks for being honest. Thanks for speaking up. And then came the moment I'd been gearing up for. I reached out to Brandon's boss, at first, without giving my name. I filed a report through their internal ethics line. It wasn't just a quick tip either. I put together a full PDF, organized, neat, clearly labeled, complete with exhibits. Inside that report, I laid out everything. The attempted fraud to transfer the house, how he misused legal documents, and the real estate scam he tried to pull while hiding behind the company's reputation. I figured it might take them a week to act on it. Took him 2 days. By the end of that same week, Brandon's name disappeared from the company's website. According to a friend of mine from college, someone who now works in compliance for the local real estate association, they kicked off an internal audit the second they saw my report. Turns out, there were more issues. They found inconsistencies in Brandon's client files too. He didn't just get fired. He was officially reported to the state board. His real estate license was frozen, pending investigation. That same day, he tried calling me. 11 times. I watched the screen light up, over and over. Never answered once. That weekend, he posted something on Instagram. Just a black background with white letters that read, some people will ruin your life and then act like the victim. He didn't tag me. Didn't have to. Everyone who mattered already knew the truth. But things weren't done yet. Just 2 days later, I got a letter from the county. A formal notice. There was a warrant being issued. That forged property title? It set off real legal trouble. Brandon was now facing charges, attempted property fraud, and filing falsified documents with a government office. I sat there staring at the letter, completely numb. This wasn't the ending I ever wanted. I didn't want to destroy him. I really didn't want any of this. But he left me no choice. And now, it was all catching up to him. There wasn't a big scene. No newspaper headlines. Just a quiet arraignment, a public defender he couldn't afford, and a whole mess of legal problems ahead. He wouldn't serve time. Most likely just probation, fines, maybe some community service. But that criminal record? It'd follow him everywhere. Finding work would be tougher. Rebuilding trust? Even harder. And the next time he tried to sell himself as some real estate hotshot, this whole thing would be sitting right there in the shadows, waiting to be found. As for my mom, she went completely silent after everything came out. No calls, no texts, no apology, not even another request for money. But then, out of the blue, about 2 months later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from her, though. From her lawyer. It was worded all fancy and formal, but the message was clear. She was dropping all her legal claims over the estate. And she respectfully requested no more contact. In plain English, she gave up. She knew she'd lost. But I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel smug or proud. What I felt was free. That same evening, I went back to the old Victorian house. I walked the halls barefoot, taking my time. The wooden floors cool and smooth under my feet. The air smelled like cedar and old pages from a library. The house was quiet, peaceful, completely mine. I stepped into the den, where Grandpa used to sit in that big leather chair with the newspaper, and I whispered. I kept it safe, just like I promised. And deep down, I really think he'd be proud. Because in the end, I didn't just save the house. I held on to my dignity. I protected my future. Brandon lost his career. My mother lost control of the story. And I walked away with something they never saw coming. The strength to stop being the one they stepped on. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet one in the corner anymore. I was the one who finished the fight.